Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and we continue our conversation about yesterday's city election results, mayor and aldermanic candidates. Good to see that the Common Sense Caucus is intact. Ray Lopez won, Silviana Tabares won, Napolitano won, Sposato won, Gardner didn't quite get to 50%, but he was at like 49, so he looks pretty good for the runoff. And we'll talk to Alderman Ray Lopez momentarily about whether or not there's any prospects to add to the hopefully forthcoming Common Sense Caucus.
And Dan, I was happy to see in the 14th ward on the southeast side, Ed Burke's ward, his hand-picked candidate, Raul Reyes, lost. And same with Mike Madigan's hand-picked candidate, he lost as well. So
there's a runoff in the 11th. Right, that went to runoff, so we'll see how that turns out. Isn't one of the candidates a Chicago cop? I think so. But you wanted to provide another Brandon Johnson offering before we get to Alderman Lopez.
He's trying to be funny last night, charismatic, personable.
He's hilarious.
Let me just go ahead and get this out the way. My wife of 25 years come June. Chicago, a black woman will still be in charge.
I see what he did there.
But the black woman who's still going to be in charge is going to be Stacey Davis Gates, who's in charge of the CTU.
Yeah. All right. Alderman Ray Lopez joins us now. Alderman Lopez, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on your victory.
Dan and Amy, good morning, and thank you for the congratulations. It's a beautiful day in Chicago today.
What about, we'll get to the mayor's race, obviously, but just quickly on the aldermanic side, to my question, are there any other prospects you saw in terms of adding to your Common Sense Caucus?
I think we probably may see, depending on how the 11th ward goes, in addition there, Anthony Saravino is a police officer, and he is very much rooted in the neighborhood and very much like-minded when it comes to being very pragmatic and common sense in what we have to do in the community. So he may be joining us there. But I think definitely a message was sent to many aldermen that you cannot just allow your rhetoric to run rampant without actually taking care of business in the neighborhoods, and that you will be held accountable. Case in point, back to the first ward with Alderman Daniel LaSpada, who, though being Italian, was all for bringing down the Columbus statue, who now faces Sam Royko, Mike Royko's grandson, for alderman in the first ward. Daniel's been very much about, the agenda, where Sam was a victim of carjacking and said, when are we going to take crime and violence seriously? Because my wife was carjacked. Yeah. So those kind of repercussions.
Sorry to interrupt, but by the way, in the first ward, Amy's favorite former alderman, Proco Joe Moreno, didn't fare so well. Yeah, I like that.
Proco Joe came in last.
That's right.
He tried.
So I think you're going to see. Yeah. I think you're going to see some change, and I think hopefully you see some mentality shifts towards pragmatism. And we've seen that even in my class that was elected in 2015 when Carlos Ramirez Rosa came in as a firebrand. But by second term, he started tampering down, realizing that yelling and screaming isn't always the best option. That sometimes in politics, you have to work with people.
So you and Lori Lightfoot going to bury the hatchet, go out for like a post-election post-mortem, and learn to love each other again?
Well, Dan, I think we did bury the hatchet in her political career. But I think,
all right, fair enough.
The fact that 83% of Chicago said it was time for a new direction, this speaks volumes. And you're right, we have now two candidates, Paul Vallis, who is very much like-minded in many ways, particularly in contrast to his opponent, Brandon Johnson, who thinks making jokes about killing puppies and looting it being something that's acceptable if you're hungry. It's just an outrageous predicament for our runoff in April.
So you endorsed Willie Wilson. Do you think Willie Wilson and yourself will now back publicly Paul Vallis and campaign with him within these next 5 weeks that are so critical?
Well, I can't speak for Dr. Wilson because obviously that's a very personal decision when you come out of any loss. And I've been there in my first campaign. I know what that's like. But I know that for me, Paul and I will have a conversation. We've always had an open line of communication, even when we were in opposition to each other. We've always been very cordial, very complimentary to each other. And I think definitely we need to come together. The point of me dropping out of the race was so that opposition can coalesce, and there's no reason for that to stop now, because we know what will happen. If we thought Lori Lightfoot was bad, Brendan Johnson will be worse. And we'll continue to see the enabling of crime in our city and the glorification of excuses as opposed to accountability.
Refresh our recollection. What was your hesitation with Vallis that led you to choose Willie Wilson in the primary?
Actually, I did not have much hesitation. The only thing that that was the deciding factor is that I've known and worked with Dr. Wilson more and longer than I did with Paul. And I believe you have to stand with those who help you, and that's exactly what I did. But now that Dr. Wilson is not advancing to the runoff, now we can reassess the situation. But I think for me, though we have not discussed it, I think it's clear that what I don't want is some hyper-left individual who thinks abolishing the police is the right answer in the city of Chicago when we've been the murder capital of the nation for 11 years running. That makes absolutely no sense to me. And I know Paul, who has a family history of government and service, whose children are police officers and firefighters, understands what those individuals go through, but also wants to reconnect with communities who've been left out by the politics and the narrative agendas. We need to get back to being Chicago that works. I know he said that last night, and I actually agree with him, because we are not trying to emulate Washington, D.C., where all you do is yell, scream, and do nothing. Yeah. We need to be Chicago again.
Well, how do you recommend Paul Vallis get the black vote? I mean, I know I spoke to some aldermen, a few black aldermen, who said, yes, once he wins the runoff, or once he wins the election, I'm going to support him in the runoff. Is that going to help, or what does he need to do?
I think that if Paul wants to aggressively go after the black constituency he now has citywide, he should absolutely do so. But don't rely on the aldermen as mediators. I believe he needs to go directly to the people, be visible, be touchable, be approachable, and be able to listen to what they have to say and complement their goals in their communities. That's how you win the black community. That's how I've won the black community 6 elections in a row. You don't try to come in as the savior. You just come in as someone to complement what they're doing and what we can do together, and that will resonate. The black community, like all communities, wants someone who will listen and talk with them, not at them.
Yeah, what's your perspective on the appetite for hard truths to be delivered across the racial spectrum in Chicago? Hard truths that need to be delivered to those street vendors in Little Village that Lori Lightfoot said, don't use cash. That's our big solution for your safety. As well as the institutional interests, the rent seekers in C-suites, the Chicago Press Corps, the public sector unions. It seems like we are a city that's addicted to beautiful lies, and maybe there would be some benefit to delivering some hard truths rather than abject pandering.
Chicago is a city that can handle the truth very easily, and it can smell BS a mile away. I've said that plenty of times. My grandma taught me that. I think Lori Lightfoot, for as much as we disagreed, could have delivered the hard truth to people because we were in that moment. But she chose a very different route in politics. Paul Vallis, should he be victorious, can deliver hard truths because he's not doing it from a place of being mean and vindictive and trying to put people down, but starting from a point of truth so that you could actually begin to lift people up. I think Brendan Johnson only seeks to pander and make excuses and continue enabling individuals' bad behavior. I think it was FDR who said that government should push you to your best, not accommodate you at your worst. And I think that's exactly what this election is going to be about in April. Do you want a mayor who pushes you to be your best, or who's just going to allow you to wallow at your worst?
When you look at the turnout yesterday, which was about what it was 4 years ago, maybe a little bit less, we'll see what the final numbers look like, but it's certainly in the ballpark. Does that give you pause at all? So less than 35%. Does that give you pause at all to say, to believe that we're in this moment where you can actually shift the paradigm on even some topics like police and public safety?
I think focusing on the percentage of turnout in any election for the past 5 years is fraught with difficulty and bad way of looking at things because of the fact that voting rolls are so bloated with individuals who should be purged from those roles and have not been because of the process that we use. When I look at my own ward, at least 1/3 of the people are not in my ward anymore. And I know this from having knocked on doors, looked for them, sent them mail, both official mail as well as political mail. I see when I get back, even when I send to all people. And if I know that they're not there, then I know that from a percentage standpoint, my ward total may show 40%, but actually I'm closer to about 70% turnout. If you take out everyone who's not in my ward, and if you apply that citywide, our turnout is very high in this city.
Really? The difference, a 40% turnout in your ward, you believe is actually 70% turnout? That's how bad the voter rolls are?
Yes. When Barack Obama was president, when Barack Obama won, we had roughly out of 15,000 people on the rolls, 5,000 of which were not in the ward anymore and should not be on my voting rolls. And I don't mean like dead. I mean moved, whatever.
All of the above.
All of the above, especially in communities where you have a lot of apartments and rentals where people tend to be more transient than a homeowner who's going to be there for 30 years. That has a huge impact. About a third of the people on our rolls don't belong there because the Board of Elections does passive removal, which means if you don't live here, send this back and we'll take you off. Well, you and I all know that if you get a piece of mail for somebody in an apartment building, you don't do the right thing and send it back. You just throw it in the corner and walk about your business or throw it in the garbage can. And the Board of Elections keeps those individuals on and on and on for 2 federal election cycles, which means you could be on there for upwards of 4 years before they even consider removing you.
Yeah, I do the same thing with parking tickets. Just throw those in the corner.
Because they'll
exactly.
pay themselves, Stan, don't you know?
Absolutely.
I hope you guys are recycling, though, because I recycle mine. So.
There was some controversy, well, not controversy, but difference of opinion about this issue of how to handle migrants who are have pending asylum applications and have made their way one way or the other to Chicago. Willie Wilson, the candidate you supported, said, look, I'm for helping everybody, but we got to focus on Chicagoans first. Others have suggested, including Vallis, I think, suggested housing them in public housing. Where do you come down on what the right policy is with respect to our sanctuary city designation generally and this specific migrant issue?
Well, I think as far as the migrants and indeed all of the unchecked, undocumented immigration that happens, we need to hold the individuals responsible who have the power to fix it, and that's our federal members of Congress. The fact that we have 19 members of Congress in Illinois and none of them have taken this up as an issue, you have a mayoral candidate who prides himself on being the leader of the Latino community who has not once pushed for this issue in his 2 terms, and neither for the guy before him for 17 years, is absolutely ridiculous. They've made the undocumented community a permanent second-class citizenry in the United States, and we can't continue down this path. I think locally, we need to readdress the Welcoming City Ordinance to take out or to put back the provisions that allowed us to coordinate with federal law enforcement if we have known documented gang members or violent criminals who also happen to be undocumented. Not just going after people because they're undocumented, but for those individuals who simply don't care that they're here and they're trying to bring our city and our country down. I firmly stand behind that and have always opposed those removals because even the undocumented people here, while I welcome them as a point of philosophy, if you're not here for the right reasons, then I have no reason to give you sanctuary in my city. But I think that we have to make sure that we are doing right for our people in the city as well. And I think there's a valid point to that, especially when you look at, for example, the fact that you have 200 to 300 homeless people descending on O'Hare Airport almost every night, while the mayor of Chicago sat on $60 million in HUD funds to help put an end to homelessness. Oh. But yet we're going to go spend $20 million to create a asylum seeker detention center in Woodlawn. Our priorities are wrong, and I think we can all address that without harming people. We can help all people.
You were perhaps among the least surprised people in the city as to Chuy Garcia's performance, or underperformance, some might argue. And I wonder if that is mainly attributable to Latino voters not representing the strength of their numbers, or just mainly attributable to the kind of candidate Chuy Garcia is.
I think it's a combination of Chuy ran a very lackluster campaign. I think he still feels he's owed something, when clearly in politics you are owed nothing but the opportunity for the voter to make a decision. I also think that a younger generation isn't necessarily happy with 30 years of propaganda without results. They see right through him, that he's done relatively nothing other than try to manipulate the movement. The older generation know him as a brand. They know him for 30 years and will always be with him. But I think that the younger generation, the 18 to 35-year crowd, are wanting leaders who produce for the community, for their community, and address some of the issues that are going on there. So he will have to assess his future, knowing that his bluff has been called, his brand has been tarnished, particularly by Bitcoin Boy and everything else that's been going on, and see what lies for his future.
And I just would have respected him so much more if he's, in reference to his son, which, Chicago police are still, he's one of those gang members that are still on their "we know who you are" list. Just admit it's like, you know what, I'm struggling like any other parent. Even though he's not a kid, he's 39 years old and still lives with him. But he just ran from the issue and just thought if he kept running, it would go away. And it's like, you can't control your own house. How are you going to control violence in the city of Chicago? But my big fear now is he's going to take his supporters and his, labor unions, and that they're going to go all vote for Brandon Johnson.
Well, I think we have an opportunity where all the old guard bench has been wiped clean. Mm-hmm. And now you're down to two individuals who are relatively new in the elected world, and that should hopefully give unions, business, and everybody a new opportunity to start fresh. So that's what I'm hopeful for.
He is Alderman Ray Lopez. Alderman Lopez, thanks so much for joining us, as always. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate your time. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Did you know Pure Talk saves the average family over $900 a year when they switch from Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile? You can save $900 a year on your wireless bill and still enjoy ultra-fast 5G service. You can get unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data for just $30 a month. And Pure Talk is so sure you're going to love their service, they're backing it up with a 100% money-back guarantee. So instead of paying a fortune to Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile every month, cut your bill in half with Pure Talk. I've done that. And then start enjoying the perks like a U.S. customer service team that will make your switch easy. Supporting a company that is